well, how should I say this? I'm having a brain fart. Actually happened last night in the middle of the sermon, doing the right from the pulpit. Anyway, if brain farts had an odor, it would have cleared the room. It was that bad.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi folks, welcome to another week of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competition, and the natural right of self-defense and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode 111, brought to you by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. CooksHolsters.com. Well, before we get started, I want to say congratulations to Team Katie at Peace Lutheran Church in Chehalis, Washington. Katie reached out to me about using the Armed Lutheran logo to raise money for her Relay for Life team. She wanted to put the logo on some beer mugs and some coffee cups, which makes perfect sense. I mean, we Lutherans, we love our coffee, we love our beer. And I told her I would allow it under one circumstance, on one condition, that she would sell me the first 5. So Katie and her daughter and her grandson put the logo on mugs and cups, and they raised over $350 for Relay for Life and the fight against cancer. Katie, congratulations. Thanks for reaching out. It was an honor to help you raise money for such a worthy cause. I'm excited to have been a part of it, and the mugs and the cups look awesome, so thank you very much. I also wanted to share some recent feedback. We have wanted to dip into the mailbag before we get started today. Episode 108, 10 Things That Rob Schenck Gets Wrong About Christians and Guns, seems to have garnered a lot of feedback. Very popular post. Here's an example. I've been exploring for a bit for any high-quality articles or blog posts in this kind of area. Exploring in Yahoo, I finally stumbled upon this website. Reading this info, so I'm glad to express that I have an incredibly good, uncanny feeling I came upon just what I needed. I most indubitably will make certain to don't omit this website and provides it a look regularly. Well, triple word score for the use of the word indubitably. Thank you for the kind words. I'm glad we could give you an incredibly good, uncanny feeling. That's really what we live for here at Armed Lutheran Radio. Another response to episode 108, my family always say that I'm killing my time here at Web, except I know I am getting experience every day by reading these pleasant articles or reviews. Well, that's absolutely right. Your family is a bunch of bozos. You should not be listening to them. You should be enjoying our pleasantness instead. And apparently we have some Portuguese fans as well. They sent us a note. My Portuguese is terrible. Seu fotos olá fantástico, which apparently means your pictures look fantastic. Well, thank you very kindly. I really do appreciate that very much. We did get some serious feedback, though, not just spam. Marvin 4. Marvin, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. He's the owner and host of the Great American Survival Show on YouTube. He recently found about our podcast from Bob Main at Handgun World. He says, I really enjoy listening to your show. I really like the different segments. It makes it a bit well-rounded and informative. Today I was listening to the newest episode and have had the same arguments with liberals I work with here. They think that banning something, again, will make it more serious, like a super law on killing with a gun should be worse than killing with a baseball bat. As a world traveler in my youth, I've seen violence in other countries. Death comes even without a gun. How very true that is. Disarming the law-abiding population only makes more and easier victims. I recently finished my studies in theology very good, and I have become a chaplain here in Georgia. As a 45-year-old business major some 20-plus years ago, it left my life unfulfilled. Now I'm reaching out to people trying to use nature to help connect them to Christ and all his glory. That is awesome, Marvin. Marvin says, thanks for all you guys do. Keep it up. Stay safe, stay armed, and God bless. Well, Marvin, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Thank you very much for listening. And Marvin even took the time to leave us a positive review, a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts. He says, I really enjoy this podcast. I love the way they break it into segments that allow us to hear from several different people who share their strengths with us, not just one person. Truly a strong and well-rounded group of professionals. We live in a world where our faith is criticized more than our right to defend ourselves. Just a breath of fresh air that I support. God bless you guys. Stay safe. Marvin 4. Marvin, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you took the time to leave us a review, and I appreciate the kind words. I know the contributors do too. I am blessed, as I've said many times, to be surrounded by awesome people, and that's what makes Armed Lutheran Radio so special, in my opinion. I've just got great people that I work with. Puffy Blake 1, who calls himself a Mormon gun enthusiast, left us a very kind review, another 5-star review at Apple Podcasts. This is my favorite gun podcast, he says. I love the things you talk about. You have a lot of good advice, and I love that God comes up frequently in your podcast. There are lots of great podcasts that talk about lots of great things, but I can't take the way the hosts talk. The way you talk in the outline of your podcast are very easy to listen to and entertaining. Well, Puffy Blake, thank you. I really do appreciate it, and thank you for taking the time to leave us a review. It really means a lot that you went to that extra effort to do that, because it's not something that a lot of people do. If you've got a comment, folks, or if you've got a question, we would absolutely love to hear from you. There was a thread recently that I saw. There's a Facebook group called Podcasts We Listen To, and one of the members of that group posted a question asking if anybody had ever, contacted their favorite podcasts, or if they'd ever corresponded back and forth. And also asked podcasters, well, what do you get out of it? How do you feel about receiving emails and feedback? And it's a great question. There are you people, you who listen to this show, you are the reason that we do this podcast. Yeah, we enjoy what we do. It's fun. But hearing from you, well, not the spammers, but even that can be fun though. But you everyday listeners who tell us what you think, who take the time to leave reviews for us, who tell us what you like or you don't like, or how a particular show or a segment meant something to you, that's golden for us. Podcasting is a labor of love. It's not easy. It's not free. And to hear from you, it really means a lot to all of us. And it makes all that labor and all that work and the money spent worthwhile. So thank you all for your feedback. And I would encourage you, if you haven't done so in the past, go visit our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback. Leave us a voice message. Leave us a voicemail at 888-571-5552, or you can send us an email. We would love to hear from you. Leave a comment on one of our episodes. Go leave us a review at Apple Podcasts. It used to be called iTunes. We would love to hear from you and to respond to you on the show. So thank you all for your comments and your feedback, and thank you for continuing to listen and support the show. All right, what have we got on the show for you today? Well, Sergeant Bill has a ballistic minute about tactical lights and gun-mounted lights. How bright is bright enough? How bright is too bright? He shares his experience as both a competitive shooter and a police officer. Aaron Israel has a tip about gripping your gun for better control. Mia is back to share her thoughts on a new carry gun. And Pastor Bennett and I have a little bit of a different article that we're taking on in Clinging to God and Guns today. This one's from the pro-gun side, and it claims that God is not protecting us from school shootings because we don't have prayer or guns in school. All that's coming your way next after this brief timeout. You're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio on the Self-Defense Radio Network.
The Self-Defense Gun Stories podcast is for people who are thinking of getting a gun, and for those who already own one. Each week we invite a firearms instructor to discuss the news. At Self-Defense Gun Stories, we study responsible gun owners who protected themselves and the people they love. Were these gun owners lucky, or were they properly trained and prepared? What would you do if you were in their shoes? What should you do? Come listen at selfdefensegunstories.com.
Guys, let me take a moment to talk. I want to get a little serious here for a moment. Something really important that you need to consider if you carry a firearm for self-defense. You need to consider legal protection, because if you end up in a fight that ends up resulting in you having to discharge a firearm, even if you don't discharge your firearm, go back and listen to my interview with Paul Lathrop a couple of years ago. Listen to my interview with Marcus Weldon last year. If you are involved in a self-defense shooting situation, even a situation where you threaten to use a gun but don't actually pull the trigger, you may end up in a legal fight after the fact. Even if you're cleared of all wrongdoing, you may find yourself being sued for simply defending yourself. You need to take precautions and to protect yourself and your family. And the way I do it, what I trust, is the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and check them out today. They provide legal protection. They provide money to get you out to cover bail. They provide initial retainers for attorneys. They recommend attorneys for your use in case you ever need to use this service. God forbid you ever do. We carry a gun every day because we hope we never have to use it. This is the same thing. It's a very small fee per year. It's absolutely worth it. Check them out, armedcitizensnetwork.org. It's the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. Use the promo code ARMEDLutheran25 and you'll save $25 off your first year's dues. Check them out today. Don't delay. If you're carrying a gun for personal protection, you cannot afford to not have some sort of legal protection as well. Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network, armedcitizensnetwork.org.
It's time for this week's self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week I want to talk to you about gripping your pistol harder. One of the number one issues I see with new students is that they have too loose of a grip on their pistol, which causes them to flinch at the last second by tightening their fingers and dipping their wrist, which causes that ubiquitous low left problem, right? That you see so many new shooters deal with, and even experienced shooters. I still see it from time to time when I'm not gripping my gun hard enough. Now, the reason you do that usually is because first off, you have a sympathetic reaction to the recoil. The anticipation of the recoil causes you to tighten your grip. That's just an instinct that you have in your body. That's your body fighting against that explosion that's happening in your hand. So if you tighten your grip up to where it's a crushing grip and you're holding it as you would hold any other tool like a sledgehammer, if you were driving a sledgehammer and using it to drive a nail, you wouldn't hold it all loosey-goosey. You'd hold it nice and tight because you wouldn't want it to fly out of your hand as you're swinging the hammer. That's how tight you need to hold your pistol. So if you're holding it that tight, then there's not going to be any more tension you can put on it as you're pressing the trigger, so you're not going to have that tendency to squeeze your fingers at the last second and dip your wrist. The second reason you do it is that you're trying to snatch a perfect sight picture. You want to hold that gun perfectly still and try to snatch that really crisp, perfect sight picture. The problem is that your sight picture can never be perfect. It only needs to be good enough, right? You just need the gun to not deviate so much that you are off target. So a drill that I have people do is called the dynamic deviation control drill, which you can do yourself. Get yourself an 8.5 by 11 size target and start rotating the gun around the target at full extension while you're looking at the sights. And then have your training partner call out shooting commands. So just tell them to have them call out the up command several times. And each time, you're going to see that you can still get hits inside that circle even while the gun is moving, right? So you can do that with a tighter circle. You can move it in a figure eight, and you'll start to get the sense that your sights are allowed to move as long as they don't move so much that you get off target. But what you have a tendency to do when you're trying to snatch a perfect sight picture is you try to hold it perfectly and then you flinch really hard as you're pressing the trigger because you're trying to hold that perfect sight picture. So that's my my advice to you if you're experiencing that low left beginner shooter and sometimes even experienced shooter problem. I see myself do it sometimes, is grip the gun harder, right? And don't try to snatch a perfect sight picture. And if you do that dynamic deviation control drill, and you can Google that and see a video of it, then that's going to help you not try to snatch that perfect sight picture. So tight grip your gun harder. Most people grip their gun too loose. That's your personal defense tip for the week. Thanks for tuning in.
Aaron Israel is a Personal Defense Network contributor and owner of Fundamental Defense. You can find out more and sign up for any of Aaron's classes at fundamentaldefense.com.
Hey, if you're like me, you like shopping at gun shows. No pressure from sales staff, no need to bother them to ask to look at stuff. You just pick stuff up and dry fire it and look at it and hold it. Imagine if you could get that experience at your local gun store, where you don't need to bother anybody. You don't have to ask people for help if you don't need it. You don't have salespeople hovering over your shoulders. Well, this is what it's like when you shop at G4G Guns. Cassie and Patrick Coburn are the owners, and you've heard them on the program before. They are absolutely awesome people, and they'll help you find exactly the right gear for you. But there's no sales pressure. You just browse the store, you pick up and hold anything that you want to look at without asking permission, just like at the gun show. And once you've found the gun you want, or if you actually do need assistance, Patrick and Cassie are there to help. It's the best of both worlds, gun shop and gun show, in one place. It really is the best. G4G Guns. They're located at 2035 Central Circle, Suite 108 in McKinney, Texas. They're open Mondays from 1 to 6, Tuesday through Thursday 11 to 7, and on the weekends you'll find them at a gun show near you. Or check them out online at G4G Guns. That's G, the number 4, G, guns.com. G4G Guns, the gallery for great guns. G4GGuns.com.
Up next, it's Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Hey guys, today I wanted to talk to you about a little tiny concealed carry gun. It's something that literally can fit into your front pocket. At least for the guys. I don't know if it would fit in my front pocket without printing pretty badly, but it would be something that I could carry in a holster on my body and conceal very inconspicuously. And that is the American Derringer. This is a little gun that my husband bought as a new concealed carry, just as a different option. As I sometimes say, I'm not a gun hoarder, I'm a gun collector, and so is he by default. But this little gun, it's a .45 long Colt and .410 shooter. And we took it out to the range. And the first time I shot it, I have a Taurus Judge with a 6-inch barrel that has a little bit of a kick when I shoot it. So I wasn't sure with this little tiny gun with the 3-inch barrel what it was going to do in my hand. The grip is fairly small. It's the entire gun is concealable in the palm of my hand. You can watch a video about it on my YouTube channel, which is at Mia Anstein. But this little gun, when I took it to the range, I used some Hornady defense rounds and a couple different type of rounds through it. I was really surprised that it doesn't have that much of a kick. I was very impressed. However, the other day, a friend came over and my husband and him went out and they shot a Bearcat round through there, and that round has a significantly higher velocity, so there was definitely a kick to it. Wasn't quite as manageable. In fact, it kind of bit the palm or the V of the hand of one of them. So that's something, if you're going to get one of those micro guns, definitely check the rounds, go shoot at the range and practice. Something that I noticed when I was at the range practicing is that my little short fingers almost reach the tip of that barrel. So you really have to be aware and conscious to keep your hands away from the muzzle. I talked about somebody shooting their own finger in a prior episode, and you really have to keep an eye on that. There is, on this American Derringer, there's not a trigger guard, so you definitely have to be aware of that as well. However, the pullback on that hammer is pretty hefty. It's 7-pound trigger, but the hammer itself, when you pull that back, it takes some weight. It's not just going to accidentally go off in your pocket. Then after that, when you are shooting, something that I notice, I generally try to get really high on the back strap of a gun. I want to get behind that recoil, manage it really well. Be careful if you get too high on the back strap, because as I mentioned, that hammer is going to come back at you. So you really want to pay attention to the angle. And when you're gripping it, there is a safety. So when you can cock the hammer, the safety depresses and it lets you lower it to half cock, so you're not going to have an accidental fire when you're lowering the trigger. When I was on target and gripping, I have, as I mentioned, such a high grip. I was depressing the safety. So I thought that I was having a misfire with the cartridges I had in there, and it was not the cartridges, it was the operator. So that was something I had to adjust my grip, since I'm a right-handed shooter, I put my left thumb against the frame, and then I put my right thumb over that left thumb so that my right thumb wasn't depressing the safety. Really fun gun to shoot. If you get a chance, I would recommend it. Go to the range. If a friend has one, ask them if you could give it a try. It's super fun. I had some comments on different posts that I've shared about the gun, and people say that it's a belly gun, which I agree. It's something that if you're going to conceal carry that and you're going to use it in self-defense, it's something when you're in hand-to-hand and, your life is in danger, that's the gun you would have. Other than that, I also learned that the Bond Arms Derringer opens differently. They're break-action guns to load and eject the rounds. But the Bond Arms opens differently than the American Arms. So now I've got to go get a Bond so I can see the difference, and then hopefully in a future episode I can share the comparison. Until next week, talk to you later. Bye, guys.
You can read more from Mia and watch her YouTube videos at miaanstein.com.
Hey folks, just wanted to take a minute to talk about our membership site. It's the Reformation Gun Club. Check it out today at gunclub.armedlutheran.us. It's where we put exclusive content. If you want to hear audio that was never released on the podcast, if you want to listen to individual segments, if you want to hear extended versions of our interviews with all the special guests that we've had on the show, if you want to hear extended versions of Clinging to God and Guns, it's as little as $15.17 per year, that in honor of the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. You get access immediately to all of the great content. If you go to the website, gunclub.armedlutheran.us, some of the buttons that you click there, the segments buttons and the select your plan button, those are, and the different contributor buttons, those are going to take you over to Podbean, where all of our content is hosted. They handle all of the signups as well, so I know some people have had questions and been a little confused. Don't be. That's where it all takes place. Podbean handles all of the hosting, and it just makes it a lot easier for us. You get members-only discounts if you sign up today. You get discounts from Cook's Holsters. If you buy through the Armed Lutheran shop, you get discounts on Armed Lutheran swag. You get discounts from Easy to See Targets, Aaron Israel's training classes, Talon gun grips, Dowtech Force, where I get all of my gun belts. You get a basic firearms trust package from $199 Trust for just $59. You get a 10% discount from the Gun Box gun safes. I have one sitting on my desk right here. You will love it. Inline Fabrication gives you 10% off your orders of $20 or more. Check out the Reformation Gun Club today, gunclub.armedlutheran.us. Choose your membership plan, decide what works for you, and take advantage of all the great content, because we've got over 270 audio files available immediately if you sign up today, and we add 4 hours of audio every month. So check it out, gunclub.armedlutheran.us today.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Sylvia.
Hey, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. So lately I've been getting a lot of questions about weapon lights, pocket flashlights, that kind of thing. What do I use? What do I recommend? Well, I will tell you this. My duty gun has a weapon light on it. It's a Surefire. I don't even know the brand on it. It's nothing spectacular. It's an LED light. Probably has 180 to 200 lumens. More than bright enough for anything that I do. I've used it searching buildings in the daylight, at middle of the night. I mean, doesn't matter what it is. Anything over 200 lumens is going to be a little bit bright. And what I mean by being a little bit bright is, so say there's a bump in the night. You have your nightstand gun. It's got a weapon-mounted light on it. And you go searching your house. Well, most houses, in my experience, have light-colored or white-painted walls. You light up a wall like that, especially close, with a extremely high lumen bright light, and the splash of your light off of that surface will blind you, effectively negating the whole reason for having the light. Now, what I do recommend to most people is basically what I carry. I carry a small pocket flashlight. I have two of them, actually. One of them is a Streamlight ProTac 1L, and the other one's I don't remember the model number. It's so old. It's a ProTac, but it's half the size. It's a very, very small light, a pocket flashlight. And it has a tail activation button, which is very easy to use. You can take a two-handed grip and press it, holding it like a cigar or a cigarette with one hand, and press that against the knuckles of your other hand while you're holding your gun if you need to activate it. But not only that, it's so small, so light, with a pocket clip on it, so easy to carry that I carry it all the time everywhere I go. And what I really find is I use it all the time. I stopped carrying a pocket knife because I barely ever used it, but my flashlight I use all the time. Go to the movies, need a little light, bam, I got it. I've even got a little technique where when I'm holding the light in my hand, I can put my pinky over the lens so that it kind of blocks most of the light, so I get just a little bit of light if I don't want to be blinded. Or if I don't want to blind somebody else, like in a movie theater if I'm trying to find a seat or if I drop my keys or something like that. But that pocket flashlight is fantastic. This same pocket flashlight, this ProTac 1L, I used at IDPA Nationals in 2016, and it worked fantastic. With the pocket clip, I pulled it off my pocket, went inside a building that they had set up, shot my targets one-handed, holding it using a cheek or a neck index so that my flashlight was in my hand up by my face. So where I looked, the light looked. My gun was out one-handed in front of me. I actually lit up the gun and the sights so I could use them in the dark. I could see my targets. It wasn't so bright that it was whitewashing everything out in front of me, which some people with their extremely high lumen lights have found that. Okay, so back to the weapon-mounted lights. If you have one of those, you have to have holsters for it. And I have one for a Glock 19, that weapon-mounted light Kydex holsters, even leather holsters, are kind of tricky. They're really hard to get the retention right on them. They're hard to holster. The gun comes out pretty decently for the most part, but the retention on them, they're just kind of weird because there's so many different shapes and parts on that weapon light. And having that weapon-mounted light, if you need a flashlight and it's on the gun, you have to take your gun out to use it. With the pocket flashlight, it's always there. You don't need to take your gun out. Just pull it out of your pocket and use it by itself if necessary. Now, I'm hearing some people and maybe thinking, hey, maybe use both. And that's not a bad idea. I've done that too. I have a Glock 19 with a weapon-mounted light on it, and I still carry a pocket flashlight because there are times when I need just a light, sometimes when I need a gun to search and use the light. I was listening to another podcast the other day, and they had, I think his name's John Correa from the YouTube channel, Active Self Protection, and this guy said he's seen over 11,000 videos that are either, police car camera or body camera or convenience store camera, surveillance camera, that kind of stuff, videos. And he said the percentage of people that have used a weapon-mounted light or a handheld light in any kind of real gun battle has been less than 1%, which is pretty significant. He did say that most of those gun battles did occur in, a lot of them were in the dark, but they were in somewhat lit conditions, a parking lot or, in a building where there was some ambient light, so they didn't have to have the lights to identify their threat. So I still say you should try it out and see which works for you, but having a weapon-mounted light is good, but having a pocket light is even better. And anything over 200 lumens is really just kind of ridiculous. You're just going to blind yourself. Now, I know some people are going to say, but I'll blind the other guy. True, but you need to be able to identify your target. And how much light do you really need to identify your target? That bad guy, that person that's possibly there to harm you. Try it out for yourself, and remember to keep practicing. This has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Department and masterclass competitive shooter. You can watch Sergeant Bill's shooting videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill.
Hey, if you need a good holster, let me take a minute to tell you about my good friends at Cook's Holsters. If you've got a need for a holster for a carry gun, for competition, for a day at the range, check out Cook's Holsters at cooksholsters.com. They're American-made Kydex holsters, custom-made for your specific firearm with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. And trust me, they stand by that guarantee. I know because I've seen it in action. Great people. You've heard Bob Cook on the podcast a couple of times over the last couple of years. He usually comes in at the end of the year on our Christmas show and talks about what's new for the coming year. He makes a fantastic product, and you will not be disappointed. Trust me, I have been using their holsters for years. I found them when I started doing reviews of holsters back when, in the pre-podcast days, back when I was blogging, and I love the product, and I trust it with my own life. You should give them a shot as well. Check them out at cooksholsters.com. Use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and get 10% off your order. Check them out, cooksholsters.com today.
Up next, we're clinging to God and guns with Pastor John Bennett.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Time now for Clinging to God and Guns, where we analyze, obliterate, debunk, and destroy articles and videos which attempt to use Scripture to support an argument in the gun rights debate. Joining us, as always, our good friend, Pastor John Bennett. Pastor, welcome back.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Well, this week, we thought we'd bring you something a little bit different. Most of these segments are a response to the anti-gun side of the debate, but today we're looking at an argument from the pro-gun side, and this is from the American Family Association's website. It was published back in February from Ryan Fisher, who is apparently the host of the Focal Point radio program at AFA, and it's an attempt to explain the rise in school shootings. It's entitled, "Why School Shootings? Not Enough God, Not Enough Guns." And he starts out like this. "I know a man who was living in a neighborhood when a salesman came to the door selling home security systems. He told the salesman he already had one. 'What's your security system?' he asked, and the man replied, 'God and a loaded gun.' It wasn't a matter of either or, but both and. I suggest that we have mass shootings because we don't have enough God on our campuses and we don't have enough guns. When tragic school shootings happen, like the one in Florida, everyone sends their, quote, thoughts and prayers, end quote, to the families of the victims. But why don't we pray before these shootings happen instead of waiting until somebody's dead? Everyone understands that prayer in school is appropriate in the wake of a tragedy like this, but if it's appropriate after, there's no reason it's not appropriate before. Okay, so we're off to a great start with a flawed argument right off the bat.
Now, in all fairness to him, he does have a point that shouldn't we always pray for the safety of our children wherever they may be, whether it's at school, whether it's hanging out at the mall on the weekend with their friends?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But, in that sense, yes, that's something that we should be doing. But it's not going to prevent a school shooter, a mass shooting.
Right.
These things happen because there is evil in this world. And the one thing that this article really fails to do is take a look at the actual causes for these things. It just seems very elementary, his argumentation throughout this article.
Yes, I would agree with that. The suggestion that he's going to make here, of course, is that because we don't have prayer in schools, officially sanctioned prayer in schools, that for some reason we don't have, that there's no prayer going on. The suggestion that without officially sanctioned school prayer, that God's not going to protect us.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't quite go to the point where he says God's punishing us in this country for our godlessness within the realm of public education. He doesn't quite say it, but he doesn't really not say it, if that makes sense. It's like
Right.
he walks right up to the line and just barely starts to edge his toe over the line and steps back.
Right. Next, he gives us a rundown of the arguments about why there's no such thing as, the separation of church and state and the real meaning of the First Amendment. I'm not going to rehash them, so we're going to skip ahead a little bit. So he's, talking, of course, about how since 1960 something we haven't had any official. That was when schools started, removing prayer from schools and removing the Ten Commandments and that sort of thing. Then he goes on to this. As Joseph Story, appointed to the Supreme Court by the father of the Constitution, James Madison, wrote, "Thus, the whole power over the subject of religion is left exclusively to state governments to be acted upon according to their own sense of justice and the state constitutions," end quote. Bottom line, says our author, according to the founders' constitution, if a state wants to allow prayer in schools, it is absolutely free to do so. It's time for state governments to start reclaiming that constitutional right, whether a federal court likes it or not, since federal courts have no jurisdiction in the matter. Well, that's a great debate and all, but and he rehashes all the different facts and the relevant points from history, but it's not going to change the minds of liberal administrators or teachers or school boards who put these policies in place, who are scared to death of being sued.
Right.
So rather than sit here and complain about the courts and activist judges or the ACLU, why not, I don't know, encourage people to get involved in their schools, to get involved in their kids' lives, to teach their kids not to be afraid to pray and to call on the Lord's name when they need to, or times of trouble or times of gladness. Just because it's not officially sanctioned doesn't mean you can't pray.
Right. Yeah. There's not a whole lot you're going to be able to do as far as getting prayer into the public schools. The closest you're going to get is possibly a officially permitted club on campus. That's about the closest you're going to get.
Right.
The problem is that many of these administrators, even those who are people of faith, in many ways, their hands are tied by the legal system.
Mm-hmm.
For those who are not people of faith, many of them are far left liberals. That's their basic religion. And unless you plan on completely cleaning house, with every administration and every public school in the country, this argument does no good.
Right.
It sounds nice and gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling, but it is very impractical. It's just not a feasible thing to do.
Exactly. To suggest, like he's suggesting that if our schools, and this is beyond our control as parents, our schools aren't going to allow prayer in schools, then somehow prayer is not going to be going on. Well, talk about look back in history to first and second century when Christians were being thrown to lions for being Christians. They weren't allowed to pray either, but somehow they managed to find time to pray even as they were being thrown to the lions. So
Right.
I think your kids can find a moment to pray at school. They don't need the official imprimatur of the school administration to be able to talk to the Lord.
Right.
So what, pray tell, if you're wondering, what does this have to do with school shootings? We've spent the last 60 years telling God to get lost from our public schools. It should come as no surprise that he's not around when we need him. That one sentence just absolutely floored me, coming from someone from the American Family Association.
Right. Yeah,
This is almost blasphemous.
right. What it is it's acknowledging the problem, and it's searching for a solution that fits your agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I can appreciate and respect his sentiment. He's making the argument that maybe we wouldn't have these problems if we still had God in the classroom. And at the same time, because that's the argument that fits his agenda, which, God bless him, that's your agenda. You're trying to look at this from a Christian perspective. Because he's looking at just that one little detail, it's dismissing the larger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also assuming that God is abandoning our children in public schools because of what the legal system has required.
Right.
So God's abandoning those faithful Christians who are attending public schools.
Right.
Is that what he's saying?
Essentially.
Around here, we are really blessed because we have several parochial schools that people can send their children to. My wife teaches at one of them, but that's not the case everywhere.
Right.
And in many cases, if there is a parochial school, it's very expensive.
Yep.
And so people don't have the ability to send their kids to parochial school. So you have faithful Christians putting their kids in public schools because that's the choice that they have to make. And he's saying that God's abandoning them.
I'm flipping through the Bible here, trying to find that passage where it says, if the government doesn't permit organized prayer, then God's not going to be there for you. I don't see it anywhere.
It's in Hezekiah 32, I think.
Well, if you think that was bad, it gets worse. It's instructive to compare the number of school shootings prior to 1963, when prayer was permitted in schools, and the number after, when it wasn't. According to Wikipedia, the number of school shootings by decade from 1900 to 1970 looks like this: 15, 19, 10, 9, 8, 17. The increase by decade after prayer was removed from schools is almost geometric: 30, 39, 62, 60, 145. The number of deaths from school shootings follows a similarly grisly progression. In the 6 decades prior to the removal of prayer from schools, there were 62 deaths from school shootings, an average of just over 10 per year.
I think he means 10 per decade.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 10 per year, 10 per decade. In the 6 decades since, the number has ratcheted up astronomically to 419, from 28 in the 1960s to 124 so far in this decade, an average of just over 70 per, again, he says year, he means decade.
It's also instructive to point out that we still had school shootings prior to 1963. So what was wrong with those schools?
Right. There was a massive shift that started in the 1960s too. And that's my problem with everything that he argues in this article, is that he completely dismisses the other societal influences.
Right. Exactly. It's one thing to, if you want to point out all of the other problems that have been developing in society since the 60s, the opposition to Christianity and organized prayer, the legalization of abortion, the normalization of gay and transgendered lifestyles, modern feminism, moral relativism, ever more and more graphic sex and violence in media, the glorification of disrespect for authority. But those are all symptoms of a bigger problem. And school shootings aren't because we're not praying in school. They're because of something bigger. And that's why a simple answer like gun control is not a solution. It's not a fix. It's not an answer to the problem. Just like saying it's just as bad to suggest, and just as simple-minded to suggest, that gun control is the answer to school shootings as it is to say that no prayer in school is the answer or is the cause.
Right. Yeah. And, the one thing that, like I said, he's failing to look at the bigger picture. What happened in the mid-1960s? That's when the divorce rate started to steadily increase.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, it was almost unheard of for couples to get divorced. And so beginning in the mid-1960s and onward, you had a steady increase of absentee fathers. You have a steady increase of children that are left to their own whims while mom's at work because mom is now a single parent.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many more factors that contribute to the problem that we see in our society, that he's looking at this with blinders on, or he is just dismissive of those and saying it must be because we don't have God in the classroom.
Right. Yeah. It's just too simplistic an answer. And both sides do it. And this argument to me is just as bad as any of the ones that we've run across previously on the other side.
Right. Yeah. Just to give people an idea, the listeners here, they have on their website this petition, hashtag number 6, referring to the sixth commandment as it's numbered in the Reformed tradition. And what they're asking for is for all public schools across the country to put up a sign in their school that says, "You shall not murder."
Oh.
And that's going to solve the problem?
We've already got the no gun signs on the edge of the property. So why is hashtag number 6 going to make a difference?
Right. Well, we have the natural law. We know, according to our human nature, that murder is immoral.
Mm-hmm.
The laws that we have in our country stem from the natural law and stem from God's law, and the framers of the Constitution express that. Everybody knows that murder is illegal and immoral.
Yep.
But it's putting up a sign that says "you shall." But that's what he gives as one of the solutions to all of this. So it kind of gives you an idea of what his mindset is in approaching problems like violence in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And violence in general within our culture.
Well, back to the author. He's now going to go from what I call religious derp to Second Amendment derp. It's always been a matter of obvious and demonstrable fact. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of all of these school shootings is that when a shooter comes on campus, there is rarely anyone, a teacher or an administrator, who is armed and able to stop him. The good guy with a gun cliche is just as bad as, the anti-gunner saying more guns means more crime. It's just, I mean, the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy who's determined to fight to stop him. It doesn't matter whether the gun is there.
Right. Yeah. And granted, the gun is a bit of an equalizer, but
Right.
it's just, again, being so myopic and narrow in your viewpoint that, but that whole, good guy with the gun, it sounded great the first time it was said, but then everybody started saying it. Now it just sounds stupid.
It really does. And this is something that Aaron Israel talks about. He's mentioned many times. I mean, the suggestion that the only thing that will stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun suggests that if you don't have a gun, that there's nothing you can do. And
Right.
what we need to be and the irony of that statement is that there were actually 5 people with guns, 5 good guys with guns at Stoneman Douglas High School the day of that shooting in Parkland, Florida. And, so tell me again how a good guy with a gun is the only answer. What we need to be teaching students, and we need to be training our administrators and our teachers, is that what you need is the will to fight back. You need to find a way
Right.
to fight the guy instead of just running and hiding from him all the time. Well, and he says it in this next sentence: armed school resource officers are simply not enough. There were 2 of them present. Actually, there were 2 plus, 5 sheriff's deputies present on the Florida campus, but the shooter easily evaded them. Mainly because they didn't go after him.
Right.
Who knows how many adults were in a position to stop the shooter, but unarmed couldn't do anything but throw their own bodies over students to protect them, as one of the football coaches heroically did in Parkland. There's more you can do than just throw. And it was heroic, but there's more that can be done than simply throwing yourself between the kids and the shooter. And that's the thing that we're not trying to teach people, that nobody wants to talk about. I mean, you don't have to have a gun to be able to protect yourself against somebody with a gun. It's harder, but if there are enough people determined to fight back, then your odds of surviving are better. And instead, what we're
Right.
teaching people is go and hide. And then our side says, well, good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun, or the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That's suggesting that there's nothing you can do unless you got a gun on you. And for most people in America, for most teachers, that simply isn't possible.
Right. Yeah. And even for those school districts where they're allowing teachers to carry, that doesn't necessarily mean that the teachers are comfortable doing that.
Right. And not all of them are going to be carrying. So does that mean that the only ones that the ones who can't carry or don't carry, they don't have, that there's nothing they can do? Of course not. There's this movie coming out, the 1517 to Paris, right? The
Right.
Eastwood movie about the 3 Americans who faced down a guy with an AK-47 on a French train, not a full semi-automatic AK-47, but a real AK-47 in a confined space in a train car, and they fought and stopped him.
Yes. Even after, I don't know if it was all 3 of them, that I know at least one of them was shot multiple times, and they still fought this guy down.
Yep. And so these crazy mass shooters are going to target places that they're going to target gun-free zones. So even if we start, as a general practice, we start arming teachers, there's still going to be targets of opportunity, because that's not going to happen overnight. If nobody in those places has the will to fight and the training and the determination to fight back with a gun or without, it doesn't matter.
Right.
We've got to get away from this mindset on our side that the gun is always the solution. And what we need to be teaching people is, you are the solution if you have the will and determination to fight back. But we're not teaching that.
Right. Yeah, it just cultivates a feeling of helplessness. Oh, crap, I don't have a gun. There's nothing I can do.
Mm-hmm. So back to our author. The Second Amendment quite conspicuously protects the, quote, right of the people, not just the military or law enforcement, to, quote, keep and bear arms. But it's there for self-defense and for the protection of vulnerable people who look to us for protection, our families and our students. That's fine. I'm fine with that. And then he goes on to talk about the FASTER program. They provide free training for teachers around the country. I remember hearing a story about a guy who was sitting on the roof of his house, and this is an old cliche. As the floodwaters rose, a neighbor in a motorboat came by and asked him if he wanted a ride. He said, "No, I'm trusting in God to save me." Then a Coast Guard helicopter came by and asked if he wanted them to carry him to safety. "No, I'm trusting in God to save me." Shortly after that, a police boat came by and asked him if he wanted to jump in. He said, "No, I'm trusting in God to save me." And you know where this goes. About that time, the floodwaters reached the roof and he drowned. When he reached heaven, he complained to God, "I trusted you to save me and you didn't do it." And God replied, "What do you mean I didn't save you? I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter." We can't very well blame God for not coming to our aid. Here he does it again, and this drives me nuts. We can't blame God for not coming to our aid if we fail to use the tools, prayer, and the Second Amendment he has graciously given us. So he's suggesting that he's, like you said earlier, this is sort of softly suggesting that God is punishing us with school shootings because we don't have school prayer and we don't allow guns in schools.
I guess. It's frustrating. It's frustrating because he sees those as the only two tools that you have at your disposal to end school shootings. And I certainly hope to God that there aren't a lot of people taking this kind of advice, because it's not practical in every situation, because most schools do not allow teachers to carry. As we saw at the Parkland shooting, that you had 5 guys with guns who didn't do squat because either they were told to stand down or they just didn't have the testicular fortitude to get off their haunches, get in there and do something.
Mm-hmm.
He's only looking at it from this one. Like I said, this guy's so myopic. It's frustrating. And the sad part is that it sounds like he's very much on our side when it comes to gun rights, but he just has, I don't know, it's the derp mindset.
Well, I think the Second Amendment derp is affecting his religious outlook. I don't understand. What really offends me about this is the suggestion that God is not with us, that he's not there when these shootings are happening because we don't have prayer in schools. And that really offends me, because God never promised that we were going to have an easy life on earth. Never said that. There's nowhere in the Bible he promises this. He promised us eternal life for those who believe. He never promised that that he's going to help us, if our government has the right policies in place. This is just that it's so insulting and offensive to me that he would suggest that God's not there for your kids because they can't pray in an official capacity.
Right. There's a great argument against what he's saying. If we look at the Old Testament, you have the examples given time and time again of Israel forsaking God.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, God did not fully forsake them. Time and time again, it speaks of the faithful remnant, that God did not fully forsake them because of even the small number of those who were still faithful to him.
Mm-hmm.
But he's arguing that God's just said, well, screw you guys, because we've taken prayer out of schools.
And that's what I think is the most dangerous thing about this mindset, or this line of reasoning. What does this say to people, the kids at Stoneman Douglas High School that day, who were actually praying on their own? What does this say to the parents who prayed with their kids on the way to school or over breakfast or before they put them on the bus that day? It suggests that, hey, God's not with you because you haven't forced your school board or your state government to allow prayer in school.
It's ironic that the story that just came out this week, actually, just a few days ago, of a pastor in North Carolina whose wife was killed and he was beaten in a home invasion and arson.
Ooh.
Yeah, this happened in North Carolina. 76-year-old pastor's wife was murdered and he was badly beaten in a home invasion. So why don't we try out this guy's argument in that scenario?
Right.
Did this happen because they forgot to pray and didn't have a gun in the process? No, it happened because there is evil in this world. And it all comes back around to, as the children of God, our protection isn't for this life, but the life that is yet to come. Jesus didn't die on the cross so that with every difficult situation we face in life, if we just get on our knees and have a gun in our hand, he's going to protect us and keep us all safe. That's not how it worked. It's not how it worked in the past. It's not how it's going to work in the future. You look at, yes, the Holocaust was an absolute horrific stain on the course of human history. And even though it was predominantly Jews who were targeted by the Nazi regime, there were also many faithful Christians who had stood up to the Nazis and were imprisoned in concentration camps because of it. Did that happen because they weren't on their knees and didn't have a gun in their hand? Because it sounds like that's what he's saying.
They didn't have prayer in their schools. That was the problem.
I guess so.
If you want to make the argument, like you were talking about earlier, if you want to look at the problems in society, the way society has changed, I'm right there with you. I'll agree with that argument. Something in society has changed. We have gotten away from God. But to suggest that one thing, school prayer, is the reason for school shootings and the increase in school shootings, to me is one of the most offensive things that we've run across in the 60 some odd episodes that we've done.
Right. Yeah, it's, and as you were alluding to earlier, it's no better than those who take a look at what happens and says gun control is the solution.
Right.
They look for the solution that fits their mindset instead of trying to look at the broader picture and look for true solutions. And the problem is that you can't really identify a solution until you identify the source of the problem.
Yep.
It's like saying, I think I've got cancer, and instead of doing a bunch of tests, you just pump your body full of chemotherapy when what you might have is just pneumonia.
Not laughing at cancer. Sorry. It's too simplistic to make this argument, and it's the kind of thing that gives the Christian gun owner a bad name, in my opinion.
Right. Well, one thing I'd be curious to find out, and I didn't think of this until just now, but yes, there has been a steady increase of school shootings. I wonder what that is in proportion to the increase in population, because I would like to see how that would be adjusted per capita for the population. But the other, and this is the one aspect that people often seem to ignore or they just don't grasp it, is that there has been evil happening in the world since the dawn of time. Mm-hmm. We are more aware of it these days because of modern technology, because we've got things like social media, because we have cable news and all these other different resources. It used to be that if something happened on the other side of the country that was absolutely horrific, chances are if you ever heard about it, it wasn't until months after the fact, if you heard about it.
Right.
But now we've got this 24-hour news cycle that something happens and within hours, and then after a while, the country just moves on to the next tragic thing that happens. We're so inundated with all this information. We've got this information overload, and I almost said information overlord. that would be the likes of Twitter and Facebook and
Zuckerberg. He's the information overlord. To your point there about the speed of news now, whenever we have one of these mass shootings, the information is immediately available. Everything's known about it. Well, I mean, lots of information that's incorrect is known about it, but it almost immediately spawns copycats because of the speed of the news. And because I was thinking about this the other day, we have all this stuff and that allows us to be more connected than at any time in human history. And yet we're more disconnected from one another. And people are looking for ways through social media and through new media to make themselves known and to be famous, to get their 15 minutes of fame. And for some of these people who are really, off their rockers, they see one of these kids who's been ostracized or bullied or nobody noticed him or whatever, and they figure this is a way I'm going to get noticed, and they see somebody do one of these horrible shootings, and instantly, very quickly, you see lots and lots of copycats, other people who have the similar mindset, who despite all of the connectivity in this world, are disconnected from the people around them and think, this is a way I can get noticed.
Right. Yeah. It seems like so much of it is a response to a lack of empathy and a desire to be known. I mean, it's
final thoughts on this line of argument.
Any solution that's a reasonable, effective solution has to do several things. First, it has to look at what are the actual societal causes of this. Now, if a person wants to argue the lack of prayer in schools is one of the causes, okay, but I rank that down there, probably in the bottom 5% of what the problem is. Yes, it'd be great if we had more prayers in schools. Yes, we might have fewer problems like this if people had the firm foundation of faith in their everyday school life. But at the same time, not everyone that attends a school is of the Christian faith. And by doing that, you're not going to suddenly make more Christians by cramming God down their throats.
Right.
So that solution, I mean, if you want to say that's part of it, that's in the bottom 5%. And I think I'm being very generous here. And it's not something that I believe is fully feasible because you have an entire network of the law that is not on your side for that. So look at the real problems. All of these school shooters, there seems to be these commonalities between all of them. Psychotropic drugs or pharmaceuticals, a lack of a father in the home. So often these are kids who are bullied, and if they're not bullied, they just don't have very many friends.
Right.
Mental health issues up the wazoo, all these different problems that are contributing to this. So look at the real problems, not just the ones that fit your agenda.
The problem with our big connected world and all of our, we can get our news instantly. We want instant, simple fixes. We want our instant breakfast in the morning. We want our instant news in the evening. We want everything to be quick and fast and easy. And when we have a big societal problem like this, where there's no simple solution, we find people on both sides of the argument who are trying to find simple solutions, and there simply isn't one.
Right.
Well, I think that does it. That about wraps it up for this one. Pastor, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure.
And if you have any comments or questions, any suggestions for articles that you would like us to dissect in a future episode, please visit the feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Tune in again next time for another edition of Clinging to God and Guns, right here on Armed Lutheran Radio.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org.
And that's going to wrap it up for this week's show. Thank you all for listening, for downloading, for subscribing. Thank you to our fine sponsors who make all this possible. Thank you to my awesome cast of contributors. And thank you, dear listener, for listening, for downloading, for subscribing. I hope you'll join us again next week. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.